Good morning. Woo, that was a little loud. Thank you, Tony, for that wonderful special music. I wonder what it is that makes us human, that sets us apart from all the wonderful animals on our planet. Is it music or is it something else? A few years back, I downloaded a book, an audiobook called The Storytelling Animal: How Stories Make Us Human. And the premise of the book is that it is not any of the other things, language or communication by itself, or music or joy, but it is stories that set us apart. In a TED Talk by the author Jonathan Gottschall, he says, human beings live inside a storm of stories. We live in stories all day long. We dream in stories all night long. Story is how we communicate with each other. Without story to organize your experience on earth, you'd experience your life as a buzzing confusion. Story is powerful. Nothing in human experience rivets human attention, hooks human attention, holds human attention like a story. Neuro researchers have been studying how stories impact our brain activity. To do this, they put a person in an fMRI machine and then read their brain activity while that person reads a story. When you read a story, your brain activity is not that of a passive observer, but of an active participant. We experience story at a neurological level. Our brains process what happens on the page or on the stage as if it is happening to us in the moment. Because of their neurological impact, stories have power. They have the power to shape our attitudes, our beliefs, and our behaviors. It is not by chance that God has given us a book of stories about himself. In college, I worked with a program called His Kids in Action. I think I've told you guys stories about it in the past. It was a Sabbath afternoon VBS-style program with games and snacks and stories and all good stuff. And I had a lot of profound experiences working with the 30-some kids who showed up regularly. One Sabbath, after we had had story time and craft time and we were playing games outside, one of the kids compared the Bible stories we told each week to Disney cartoons. And I tried to stop and slow down and explain to this child that the stories we told each week, they're different, they're real. And I realized that this kid had never been exposed to the Bible anywhere but our Sabbath afternoon program. In her mind, stories of a man multiplying loaves or a fish swallowing a prophet were just as magical as stories about flying carpets and glass slippers. But the Bible is not a book of fairy tales. It is a book about real people. It is a book of stories that can impact our lives. And so today, I want to retell with a little bit of holy imagination the stories of 3 people. All of the stories come from Luke's gospel, and each person's life changes through an encounter with Jesus. Because the story of Jesus can change us, can transform our hearts. I like the way the Message Bible puts it in Romans chapter 12. As Gail just read for us, let's read it again. So here's what I want you to do, God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life. Place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit in without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. What I hear there is live the gospel story. Let Jesus transform your heart. My relationship with Jesus goes back as far as anyone's could, I suppose. Joseph is my second cousin, 3 times removed or something like that. My mother could explain it all exactly to you. When I was young, we had a family reunion of sorts organized by Caesar Augustus. Everyone had to go to their own hometown to register, which meant a lot of family was coming to Bethlehem. And of course, they all asked to stay with us. There was tons of work to be done, cleaning and getting everything ready for guests. Our home, like most homes in Bethlehem, is built on 3 levels. The first level is where the animals stay when it's cold. Then you climb up a bit and there's the main living space where we eat and sleep and sew and talk. And then on the last level is a small upper room, a small guest room reserved for special occasions. We'd prepared the main room and the upper room because so many family members were coming. Everything was busy and bustling. Us cousins were running around together with our newly met best friends. And then Joseph showed up. We all knew that he had disgraced the family, and now he'd brought her into the house. Everyone just kind of stopped and stared. Big, strong Joseph and a very scared, very pregnant Mary. My mother broke the silence. She set my brother and I to get clean straw, and I knew then that they would stay on the lowest level of the house, the place normally reserved for animals. Usually a couple expecting their first child would be treated to the best of everything, but there was no space in the upper room, at least not for Joseph and his pregnant fiancée. The night Jesus was born, we were awakened by Mary's cries. Mary wrapped the baby in cloths and placed him in a manger, and then something strange happened. All at once, a dozen shepherds crowded into the little room. It was a sight to behold. Not the baby, he looked like any pinched newborn, but these smelly shepherds. They crowded around the manger, praising God for this baby, crying like babies themselves. Their wizened, weathered faces had lived through a lot, but they almost glowed as they worshiped. The birth of a firstborn son is meant to be a time of praise and worship and exceeding joy. But my house that night, it was full of tension and gossip and shared knowing looks. There was no room in the upper room, and there was no joy in the house. We hadn't provided the celebration Jesus deserved, so God sent shepherds, outcasts who aren't even allowed in the temple because they're considered unclean. He sent them to teach us what worship looks like. I walk past that manger almost every day. And every day in my mind's eye, I see the beaming, wrinkled shepherds' faces full of adoration. Their praise, the testament of their sincere worship, is why I became a believer. That moment transformed the way I worship. that moment with Jesus transformed my heart. Have you let Jesus transform your heart? Too often, we behave like Joseph's family, don't we? We let judgment overcome joy, and worship should be joy-filled. We have the privilege of a relationship with God. And when we encounter Christ, he offers us salvation and offers to transform us inside and out. But change can be a scary proposition. And sometimes it makes people want to hide. I didn't want him to see me. I didn't want to intrude, but I had to try. You see, it had been 12 years. 12 long years. I was broken. Worse, I was unclean, disqualified from being one of God's children. My husband had divorced me, and even my friends had stopped coming to visit. I felt like a leper. But there wasn't even a leper colony for me to find community with. 12 years. No church, no shared meals, no handshakes or hugs, and my money was gone. I'd spent it all on charlatans and healers and priests. All of them said they could help, but in the end, they took my money and never did. And then I heard about Jesus, a new traveling healer. They said he could bring sight to the blind, and that planted hope in my heart. I couldn't pay him. I didn't have any money left, so I watched and I studied. I waited until there was a crowd. I said to myself, if I can just touch his clothing, I will be healed. I knew of his power, but not of his love. I had faith that he could, but not that he would, and so I made a plan to heist my healing. I weaved my way through the crowd, getting closer to Jesus with each step. I didn't want to end his ministry. I didn't want to make him unclean. I wouldn't touch him, just his clothes, just the fringe of his robe. I was stealing a healing. Jewish men wear fringe as a reminder that God is our God. When we left Egypt, God told us, if you will listen carefully to the voice of the Lord your God, then I will not make you suffer the disease I sent on the Egyptians. For I am the Lord who heals. Even though I was excluded from faith fellowship, I claimed that promise. I am the Lord who heals, and I believed that God could heal me. If I can just touch his clothing, I will be healed. My heart pounded. The crowd pushed and jostled, but finally I was close enough. I reached out my hand to touch the fringe on Jesus' robe. And in that moment, I felt something. It was as though power jumped from the fringe, through my fingers, up my arm, and into my very core. In that moment, I knew that I had been healed, and my heart soared. But an instant later, it came crashing down to earth because Jesus asked, "Who touched me?" The disciples laughed, and the one called Peter said, "Master, the people are crowding around and pressing against you." But I knew. I had pickpocketed his power. I had gotten my cure through crime, and I deserved to be punished. So I did the only thing I could. Trembling with joy and with fear, I threw myself at his feet. I confessed what I'd done, and I explained the reason why, the 12 years of agony, the money spent on charlatans. And then Jesus did something I didn't expect. He bent down, he took my face in his hands, and he said, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." I thought I had been healed before. I had been, but only my body. His eyes saw me, not just my sickness. His smile spoke volumes, and he touched me. I had expected condemnation, but I got commendation. I expected rebuke, but I got a reward. I am no longer broken. I am whole. Today I can hug my sister. I can join in celebration. I can be part of the holy nation because of him. Jesus healed my body, but more than that, he healed my heart. And it's better now than it ever was before. No handshakes or hugs. Sounds a little bit like the world we're living in right now, doesn't it? I certainly hope that our world doesn't last 12 years in this state. When I hear that question, who touched me? And Peter's response, it makes me wonder who else was in the crowd. Because as Peter said, people were pressing against Jesus. She is not the only person who touched him that day. There had to be other broken people, but they didn't come with expectation, and they didn't make a declaration, and they left the same as they were before. Sometimes going home the same as you were is all you want. But tragedy has a way of getting in the way. A short walk can make a big difference in your life. A week earlier, we'd walked the same 7 miles to Jerusalem with excitement and anticipation. It was Passover, and we couldn't help but wonder if this was it, if this was the moment when Jesus was finally going to make his move. Our hopes mounted as we joined a crowd hailing him in his ride into Jerusalem. But now, we were on the road back to Emmaus, and all our hopes were dashed. The one on whom our hopes were pinned had been pinned to a cross. The loss was overwhelming. How could we have gotten it so wrong? As we walked, a stranger joined us on the road. I mustered a hello. The last thing I wanted to do was make frivolous small talk. My heart was still breaking. In his dim-witted naivete, the stranger asked, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" The question stopped my husband and I in our tracks. How could he be coming from Jerusalem and not know? Cleopas regained his composure first. Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there? The things concerning Jesus of Nazareth? The story tumbled out of us. How we had hoped and prayed that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. We told of the triumph of the entry on Sunday, and then the catastrophe of Friday. This morning's news of the stolen body. When the torrent of our words ceased, the stranger added impoliteness to his stupidity. How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter into his glory? The gall of this stranger. Had he missed the anguish in our words? And he didn't stop there. He didn't stop there. However dumb he might have seemed, this stranger knew his Bible. Beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained what was said in all the scriptures about the Messiah. When the stranger had joined us walking along the road, I just wanted to be left alone, to get home and ignore everything, put it behind us. But now, a few hours later, I didn't want our journey to end. He explained passages I had known my whole life in a way that made me see them with new eyes. As he expounded, traditions which had grown dull with time leapt to life with new meaning. My heart burned within me. We reached Emmaus, and we begged him to stay with us, at least for dinner. The kids greeted us at the door. There were stumbling introductions, a kiss of welcome, a needed foot wash, oil for our heads. The unexpected visitor flustered my mother. The trip to Jerusalem had been pricey, and there wasn't much in the pantry. And of course, she wanted to impress the stranger. We sat down at the table, and we asked him to give the blessing. He took the bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to us. In that moment, the grief lifted, and we finally recognized Jesus, our crucified, resurrected travel companion. A short walk can make a big difference in your life. It can replace sorrow and shame with comprehension and celebration. A short walk can transform your life and your heart. The story doesn't end there. They run back 7 miles to Jerusalem. And there they find their friends testifying that Jesus is alive, he is risen. And while they're still in the room, still talking, sharing the story, Jesus stands among them and says, "Peace be with you." Jesus is alive. But the story doesn't end there. You see, we live inside a storm of stories. Story is how humans communicate with each other. Story is powerful. This story, the story of Jesus' birth, his life, his death and resurrection, it is a powerful story. It has the power to shape attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors because Jesus can transform hearts. This week, we have a lot going on. Maybe in your personal lives, but also in our country. There are a lot of unknowns. There are possible disappointments and triumphs. But whatever happens this week, our world will keep turning. Jesus will still be alive, and Jesus will still have the power to say, "Peace be with you," and to transform our hearts. The gospel story, we find it in the pages of our Bible, but it is not finished being written. We are not passive observers in the story, but active participants. I love the way that the Message Bible puts it in Romans chapter 12. Here's what I want you to do. God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing that you can do for him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture. Or could we add to the politics going on in your world? That you fit into them without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God, on the story of Jesus, and you will be changed from the inside out. So this week, I want to invite you, to challenge you to do something. To read the Gospels, to enter into that story, and to let Jesus shape your heart. Whatever happens in our world, ask God to transform you into an ambassador of the gospel, a character in his story, and to tell others about the story that can transform their lives and their hearts. Will you pray with me? Lord, thank you for being our travel companion, our family, our Savior. We invite you into our stories this week. We give you the pen and ask you to be the author of our stories, to take over from us and to transform our hearts. Amen.